We've had an academic analysis and discussion of the Middle East from students who studied under Professor Binder from around the country. We've had the students who are working with him still today introduced. And finally, we're going to have some words from mentors and colleagues. And we're going to start with Amanda Rizkallah, who is a PhD candidate in UCLA's Department of Political Science. She is studying, and her dissertation is on the long-term consequences of civil war on states and societies, with a special focus on Lebanon. And I think it's very appropriate that she's teaching a class at 4 o'clock right now, so she's really in line with what Professor Binder has taught her, and so she will be our first speaker. Amanda Rizkallah.
Thank you. So, as Professor Spiegel mentioned, I will be teaching in a few minutes, and that is thanks to Professor Binder, who has taught me a lot of what I use in the classroom, especially because I'm teaching some of his old courses, so that's really exciting. I think, let me start with, I guess, the first time I met Professor Binder was when I was thinking about coming to grad school here at UCLA, and I had a visit with him kind of scheduled into my day, and I asked him, I'm worried about coming to UCLA, and what if you retire? You're the only one that I can work with. And he said, listen, as long as I can, I am willing to help you. Come here. And that was a huge, encouragement to me in that moment, that someone, so senior and so respected would say that to me. And it was a big factor in me coming to UCLA. And he is currently on my dissertation committee. So. But that was just the beginning, because in my second year, the first class that I was a teaching assistant for was Professor Binder's class about the international relations of the Middle East. And then I would go on to TA for him for Islam and politics as well. And I think this was mentioned by the first panel, but something that very much struck me in all these courses was that even though he was talking about contentious politics and things that were really controversial, you never really knew where he stood on the issues, because he did such an amazing job at trying to be as objective as any human can be, but then also presenting all the different narratives. Let's say, especially, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, I will never forget, presenting all these narratives and all these perspectives that we could take and understanding, what are the most important kind of issues, what are the stories that different sides tell, and I still use that kind of way of speaking about contentious politics when I'm lecturing courses about the Middle East. And so yeah, that definitely stuck with me, but I think one of my favorite moments was always when students were turning in the take-home final, because most professors would just have students turn it in online or just drop it in their box, but he insisted on having a 2-hour block in which students came and handed in their papers in person. And he got a chance to interact personally with every single student, even in a lecture hall, when they turned those exams in. And I thought that was so amazing. And for the TAs, our kind of part of it was that we got to sit there for 2 hours with Professor Binder and just talk about current events. And I remember the first time we did that thinking, I'm sitting with Leonard Binder just talking about the news. This is awesome. And I'm not qualified in any way to, be doing this, but it was such an enriching experience that he was willing to have those conversations with us and to spend his time with us. And that transferred definitely into the way that he helped me think about my research. I must admit, I left every office meeting with a lot more questions than answers, and just a lot of, that just complicated everything I was thinking about. But he was always so amazing at just using a sentence or two to pull me out of this, this amazing sounding theory that I was building that had nothing to do with reality, and telling me, wait a minute, Amanda, do you really think that Like, that makes sense. Is that how people work? Are those really their incentives? You know, in the real world, does your theory resonate? And I'd always leave feeling, not quite, I need to work on that. So I'm so thankful for all your wisdom and all your difficult questions, because they have pushed me to come up with a theory that I think resonates a lot more with the real world than I otherwise would have. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Our next speaker, Gerald Green, who is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Pacific Council on International Policy, was very helpful in preparing this day. And when Robert Bianchi kept talking about Jerry, this is Jerry. And Gerald Green, in addition to his present position, he's also a professor at a university whose football team is playing ours on Saturday, and we hope they lose. I'd also like to say that he's been at Rand, the University of Michigan, the University of Arizona, written everywhere, and will give us the University of Chicago perspective, because he studied at the University of Chicago, along with Robert Bianchi, at a slightly different time. Jerry Green.
Thanks, Steve. Well, I want to thank Steve Spiegel and Salome Mohajjef both for doing this and for inviting me. The one thing immediately, the difference between the University of Chicago and UCLA, is I never heard of Professor Binder. There was Mr. Binder. There was no professor stuff at Chicago. And it was an astonishingly flat place in terms of our interactions with our teachers, in which we really kind of eyeballed one another across the table, and we spoke with great candor and great frankness. We talked about Iran and Israel all the time, unlike UCLA. But Bianchi was right. It was Edward Shills and Clifford Geertz. It was a magical place. It really was. A professor's legacy is not only the books that he or she writes, and several years ago I went to see Mr. Binder, and I gave him all of the books that he had written that I owned, including one that I had stolen from the library at the Hebrew University. And I said, I'm sure your grandkids would like to have these, because some of these are hard to find, so I hope my namesake, the other Dr. Green, the real Dr. Green, actually got these, because they truly are treasures. Beyond that, though, I just want to read a list of my Chicago. These are Chicagoans who Lenny taught over the years. And you look at their net production. I mean, Bianchi's written 5 books by himself. Ilya Harik, Lou Cantori, both of whom are no longer with us. Augustus Richard Norton, Dick Norton, who writes on the Shia in Lebanon. Marcy Patton, Eric Davis, Hamid Ansari, Donnelly Bowen, Bob Bianchi, Dan Brumberg, Evelyn Early, Ibrahim Karawan, who we make sort of an honorary Chicago guy, but he's really from UCLA, Steve Kerr's babysitter, as he tells everybody, Khalil Jashan, Muhammad Amin Rais in Indonesia, Atur Rahman in Dhaka, Steve Heidemann, and I could spend an hour talking about the accomplishments of every one of them. And again, this is a result of their having spent time with Lenny. What he taught us were really 2 things. One is the uniquely important value of language. He started the Nadwa al-Arabiya so that we could have conversations and discussions on professional issues in Arabic. And he was always easier for me. We're both Bostonians. He speaks Arabic with a Boston accent, so it was a little easier for me to understand him than some of our other guests. But language was extraordinary, and I remember Lenny showing up in Tehran. I was dissertating. This was in the middle of the Iranian Revolution, and he started speaking this fabulous Persian that I didn't know where it came from. I was absolutely astounded. So his gifts as a linguist really mean a lot to me, because this was important. And then as a social scientist, we didn't read political science. We read smart social science stuff, some of which we didn't really know the disciplinary boundaries, because at Chicago they really don't exist. And Lenny developed this fascination with epistemology and phenomenology, and we were reading that. And it really, it sort of created a sort of mindset that really has stayed with many of us for years and years and years. I want to end, actually, Lenny's not sort of a schmoozy guy, sort of, Anconia is charming and sweet, but let me actually make I'm not really a full-time professor anymore. I profess, but I do other stuff as well. And I think that what I would like to see and what I'd like Lenny's legacy to be, and perhaps others, is there was a time when the policy community in Washington was very attentive to people like Leonard Binder. He showed up in Tehran. Ambassador Sullivan, who just passed away, insisted on seeing him. We went in. I'd been there for 9 months, and Lenny's analysis of Iran was much smarter than mine. And I actually had been there, and Sullivan listened. So what I would recommend, as someone who is at the Pentagon a lot, the State Department a lot, it would be nice for academic Middle East specialists to get back in the game. We would like, if we're fetching about Washington, which we are, they're not going to listen to us unless we speak a language which matters to them and address issues of concern to them. So the issue for my recommendation for everybody is we've worked too hard to develop this field. And I say we, I played a small role, Lenny played an enormous role, that we really need to have this training put to good use and have Washington seek our advice and to listen to us and augment what they hear. There are Iran specialists who've never been to Iran, Arab Springologists who can't order a meal in Arabic. It's astounding what passes for expertise in the real world. And you've got it all here, particularly UCLA as opposed to SC. You've got all the area centers and the language programs and so forth. It's really imperative to get back in the game. So if, a legacy for Lenny and for, I'm not getting any younger either, for the rest of us is let's, put our wisdom to work on behalf of humanity and not simply, the American Political Science Association and MESA and these other charming things, which really nobody cares about except, the people that, let's get this stuff out there because otherwise all of this work and this tremendous legacy is for naught. And we as a country and as a people are going to suffer. So that's actually a takeaway. That's something very, very specific. But all the Anconia are richly deserved. Lenny, I am more indebted to you than you can possibly imagine. And it's nice to finally meet your kids who, when your son got his job at Buffalo, I remember how proud you were. It's nice to actually meet him in the flesh. So thank you so much. Steve, thank you.
So we're going to move from the University of Chicago to back to UCLA, and we're going to move to colleagues in the department. In his second sojourn at UCLA, as we said earlier in the day, Leonard Binder was the chairman of the political science department, and in preparing this program, I asked him who he'd worked particularly closely with, and that reflects our next two speakers. The first is Richard Anderson, who is a Soviet specialist, and with the end of the Cold War, he moved into linguistics, and the first book in his new series was published this year, Discourse, Dictators, and Democrats, Russia's Place in a Global Process. Richard Anderson.
I prepared a couple of remarks, and then I discovered, listening to the people earlier in the day, that I was duplicating them, which actually is an important indication of just how authentic Lenny Binder is. Everybody tells the same story about him. So let me diverge a little bit, and I'll still make some of the remarks I prepared. I first met Lenny when I came for my job interview in '88 or '89. And I'm going to quote to you the first words out of his mouth, but I'm not going to quote them accurately because one of them is profane. And the first words out of his mouth were, "We hear you're really obnoxious." Okay, when you get a question like that in a job interview, there's only one thing you can do about it, because if you deny it, you confirm it. So I said, "Of course I am." And then we had a serious conversation. And I owe my career to that question. Right, and we heard from Robert Bianchi earlier that Lenny had this reputation in Chicago. You get it by speaking your mind. You don't get it from people who respect people who speak their mind, like Lenny. You get it from people who don't. And I'd spoken my mind, and that's how I'd gotten that reputation. And what Lenny did for me that day was he gave me the opportunity to dispel that illusion, to which I owe my whole career. So I'll take this opportunity to say thank you. The other thing that I think should be indicative to you, John Zeller and I probably, we're longtime friends. We've known each other for many years, but I don't think we agree on anything. It's one of those things. John's also an outspoken guy. But here we are. And Lenny picked us, as Steve said. And I think that also tells you something really important about him. When he was chair, he could bring together people who were as strong in our mutual disagreement as myself and John. And, that's always possible to do. There's an illusion that conflicts of interest create behavioral conflicts. All conflicts of interest, as long as it's a mutually profitable game, are resolvable. That's what A Beautiful Mind, Nash, he was not just a guy who was crazy. That's what he showed. There's a compromise that can always be found. Lenny could do much more than that. That compromise can be achieved by mediating, or it can even be achieved by people who aren't mediating but simply recognize where each other are. There's something more that Lenny could do. And what Lenny could do, Lenny was a reconciler. Max Weber, when he talks about charismatic leadership, he talks about people who can reconcile opposites, who can embody in themselves opposite points of view. That's what you heard earlier today about Lenny. They talked about the area specialist and the game theorist. Lenny, by the way, has never been an area specialist. Lenny's a political scientist who happens to work on Iran, or on Pakistan, or on the Middle East. Right? So that is an area, but at heart he's a political scientist who looks for his evidence in those locations. I was trying to be a political scientist who looked at the Soviet Union for my evidence and later at Russia, but until I knew Lenny, I didn't know what that was. There's, pursuing that theme a little bit, a definition has been given of intelligence. Right? Intelligence is the ability to hold in your mind two irreconcilable ideas simultaneously. And if that's the definition of intelligence, I've seen it, and all of us have. One final remark. After I'd known Lenny for a couple of years, I started consistently addressing him as tzaddik. Knowing who I am, it may have occurred to you that I probably don't know Hebrew. And you would be correct that I don't. And therefore, I hope what I was calling you, Lenny, meant surpassingly learned and wise. And if that's what I was saying, it was the right name.
To show you how broad Leonard Binder is, not that any of you needed showing, but our next speaker is in a very different field. John Zeller studies American politics and public opinion. He has a forthcoming book, A Theory of Media Politics, and another one he's working on with 3 graduate students on beating reform, the resurgence of parties in presidential nominations, 1980 to 2000. Different field, but he also has something to say about Leonard Binder.
Well, I'm going to be saying some of the same things that Dick said, only differently. I met Len Binder also at my job talk at UCLA when he was, I would say, an incorrigible opponent of everything that I was saying, and I was pretty sure I wasn't, and this was at the job talk, I was pretty sure that I was dead in the water, but I did wind up coming here. I'm not sure why that was, how I got past Len, but anyway, the next year, my first year here, I was on a search committee that Len was the chairman of. UCLA was kind of, as a department, under reconstruction at that point. They were bringing in famous outside people, that was Len, and then very junior people like me, and then they put like all of us new people on a committee with Len as the chair. And I was kind of nervous about that. My first experience with Len had been intimidating. Nonetheless, we worked well, and we hired some people, and we were off on the reconstruction of UCLA. I don't know how many of you would know this, but Len was he was the youngest chair in the history of the University of Chicago Political Science Department before coming here, and he was given a Reconstruction task there, which he accomplished well, and he was soon the chair here, working at Reconstruction. When he got some slots to give out, he created a search committee that they called an omnibus search committee. It would search all different fields, comparative, IR, theory, American, and he made me the chair of it, which was odd because I was an assistant professor in American politics and he thought I was stupid. I didn't get it. But I figured that I didn't have much independent power in the situation, and so that I would have to be just Len's henchman. And I understood that much, and I embraced the role. And every night I called him up at home and told him what was going on in a lot of detail. I'm sure that this is in dossiers, places now, in old files. But anyway, it worked well, and we made some hires. But what was great for me about this was, Len is a master political strategist, a guy who cares about power and the proper use of power, and I got to observe this up close and personal in strategizing with him. And Len, the thought that came to me back at that time was what they said was a remark that Metternich, the great political strategist, made back in the 19th century when Talleyrand died in the middle of some negotiations. Metternich said, "I wonder what he meant by that." And Len did scrutinize everything that anybody said, and everybody responded to Len in the same way. I wonder what he meant about that. And so I was there, and he was making these calculations, and I wasn't deep enough. I mean, that had been my problem at the beginning, but it didn't seem to me that he always had a plan. Everybody thought that he had a plan, that he was many levels deep, but my impression was that that was what he wanted, was everyone power to be feared, and that he was just a better open field player than anybody at the last minute when it came down to that. So I got a personal insight into this just a couple of years later when I had, and my wife, Barbara Geddes, had an outside offer, and so we, gave the offer sent the offer to Len and waited for the response, and waited, and pretty soon, it was like 2 days before we had to accept, and so I thought, I wonder what he means by that. It seems kind of obvious that maybe this is like going back to that first job talk. But my wife said, no, if he doesn't want us around here, he's going to have to tell us. And so she went in bravely to speak to him, and it turned out that he had just misplaced the papers. But he responded in a brilliant and courtly manner, and as you can see, we're still here. And the hiring committee also was successful, and his reconstruction project was successful not only by his own presence here, but how he managed the place. By the time he left, or shortly thereafter, I think that we were ranked the 8th department in the country. That was up a considerable amount and higher than we've been since. So that was a considerable success by him. Just one other thing I wanted to say about my experience with Len. I was truly awed by this, that he was, probably most of you know this, but he fought in the Israeli War of Independence and was captured. It was a prisoner of war, and he was telling me about this, and it was awesome. But what made the deepest impression on me was the way he talked about the other side. He didn't talk about them. He was respectful of their humanity, that's what I want to put it. And he was as upset as I've ever seen him about anything over some of the atrocities that were committed by his side. He was into the humanity of people and absolutely rigorously honest about it, and I appreciated that a lot, and I felt like that was the way also he conducted departmental affairs. As Dick was saying, Dick and I are on the opposite sides of a very badly factionated department, not as bad as the Middle East, but bad. And Len was able to treat everyone fairly, absolutely fairly, and the only thing that would really make him mad was if you tried to be unfair or take an unfair advantage of anyone. And Len, I really saw that. A great man. So it's been my privilege to know you. Thank you.
We now reach our last and final stage of this afternoon's program. Let me put it subtly. Len will not leave empty-handed after these two speakers. The first is Yvette Hospian-Beers. She will speak for Islamic Studies students because she received her PhD in Islamic Studies in 2013, which is after Len Binder retired. So you can see he sort of retired. Her dissertation, which is now almost completed as a book, is on the political ideology of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. I swear, she has maybe the only person alive who has read every one of his public speeches, and probably some of the private ones too. But at any rate, she will be part of our CMED series with Routledge Press. But today, she will talk about none other than Leonard Binder.
Well, Dr. Binder, it's my humble honor to speak about some of my experiences studying under your very watchful and caring eyes and your wisdom. I had prepared a lot of things to say, but everybody said everything I wanted to say. So I am going to take a different route. Probably start with when I first met Dr. Binder. It was in fall of 2007. I had just left a very prominent position with the US government and had finished my master's. I was finishing up my master's in theology, actually, where I did comparative studies of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, with an interest to work in an area that concerned Middle East. So my mentor at the Fuller Seminary said, Yvette, I think that you are born to go and study at UCLA, and that's where you should be. And so he said, here is a list of professors that I want you to go and start speaking to and kind of like conduct an interview and find out which professor you really want to work under. And on top of the list was Dr. Binder. So, Dr. Spiegel was included also. And so I met with a number of professors. And when I spoke with Dr. Binder, I will tell you why I decided to study under him and found that confidence that he was really the one. First, Dr. Binder's very gentle approach, that when he was speaking with me, I felt so free as this almost nobody and a student that was just starting, wanted to start a PhD program, that he had so much respect for my views when we were discussing Iran, because I immediately knew that that's the area I wanted to work right on and study. And what also really attracted me in working with Dr. Binder was that we shared Iran actually in so many ways. When he told me about his work in Iran and his studies, and of course I was a very young girl when the Islamic Revolution started, so there was this emotional connection that I felt like Dr. Binder really understood me, and he would really understand the work that I wanted to do. And of course I saw his passion for Iran, for Middle East, his knowledge in political Islam, and so combine all of this, I was determined that Dr. Binder was it. And so just to put a spin and a funny spin around on this, I am married to the other side. My husband is a SC professor. So can you imagine, I went home and I told my husband that I have decided to go and study at UCLA. So his grievances were very great that, he not only had to have a wife go to the other side and study, but he had to pay tuition money to this other side. So that was a very difficult decision for him and to accept. So as soon as I got accepted at UCLA, you know what Dr. Binder, my husband, did? He bought a flag that said "House Divided." So that flag is still sitting there, but he made an agreement with me that he will pay my tuition to UCLA if I agree that I will go to campus with a USC license plate. And I drove to USC for 5 years with to UCLA 5 years with a USC license plate, and I am surprised no one really damaged my car. So Dr. Binder, let me just talk a little bit about quickly about the journey of writing this dissertation and why this dissertation ultimately became a success. What I liked about Dr. Binder as my advisor, he allowed me to think freely. He allowed me to be able to do my research independently, to look into the problem areas, offer the solutions that I wanted to bring to the table. And he also had this very gentle and very equal respect for his colleagues who were my committee members. That gave me so much freedom to be able to benefit from the wisdom of my other committee members. I remember once when I was writing my dissertation, and one of the committee members had sent me a list of questions and said, Yvette, can you answer, I'm almost done, 1 minute. Can you answer these questions? And I sent it to Dr. Binder, and Dr. Binder said, you need to just work very freely with everyone, and you don't ever need to ask my permission. And seriously, this gave me the opportunity to be able to benefit from the wisdom that Dr. Spiegel had or my other committee members, and I really thank you. And I'm very grateful to you, Dr. Binder. And my family is very grateful to you. Greg sends his regards, and he really appreciates everything you have done. And so is my son, whom you really supported when he broke his leg while I was writing my dissertation. So for that, our family has a gift for you. And so I wanted to give you a gift that would represent the work you have done. And so to also show a reflection of everything of your life and everything you've done. So our family decided to give you a globe in a hand that it shows the care that you have shown for so many people, care that you've shown towards the world through your scholarship. And we had a person to engrave gratitude to you, and he messed up a little bit. And so when the colors got messed up, and when I showed it to my husband, I was crying last night. He says, well, it's a reflection of the book that you're writing is the resistance of the Middle East hand. So anyway, I wanted to give this to you, and thank you for everything you've done. You can put it back in the bag.
Thank you so much, Yvette. And now Jeff Lewis, the chairman of the Department of Political Science.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. I think I am all that is standing between you and hearing from Len, and so I guess I now know what it's like to open for the Beatles. I won't delay the moment you've come for very long. I did want to first just thank Steve Spiegel and the staff at CMED for putting this wonderful event together today. They did all the work. We're happy to co-sponsor, but it was Steve's doing, and I'd just like to take this chance to thank Steve for that work today. I've been chair now for a little while, and when I first became chair, I had a quick conversation with Len where he said to me, we have something in common. And I thought, well, we're good looking and we this sort of thing. But I thought what he meant was to mention that he had been chair at UCLA, and of course I knew that. Everybody knows the role that Len played in building the department, and the role that John described earlier, and also that Dick described. And so I knew those things, and so I was sort of bracing for a story I thought I knew, and he said no, we have something in common, and that is that we both became chairs at a time that we were associate professors, and I was an associate professor at that time. He said that's unusual, and we were both chairs, and I said, well, Len, tell me about that. And he says, well, the year was 1964, and it was the University of Chicago. And so that story has really stuck with me, because I think while everybody here has thought of Len as a role model for their career, someone who has been their role model, for me, he's someone who will be my role model as I think about the future of my career and all the possibilities that one can have after one serves as chair at a young age. So it is truly remarkable. It's truly remarkable. The amazing things that Len accomplished both at Chicago and then again here, and for so long going forward. And so when I think of all of the things that I haven't gotten done while being chair here, I think of all the years that I have ahead of me, and if I can be just a fraction as productive in those years as Len has been, if I can have you as a role model, I'm very excited for what the future holds. And so for me, thinking about you is a great thought for the future. The department would like to, and CMED, we would like to also recognize at this time the service that you've provided to UCLA over a very long period of time. I think too often we don't celebrate these moments, and it's such a wonderful thing, and I thank all of you for coming to participate in this celebration today. So what we have is this extremely heavy glass brick. And it says, in honor of Leonard Binder, esteemed professor of political science, inspirational mentor and scholar, UCLA is grateful for your dedication to your students, colleagues, and the field of Middle East studies. And it commemorates the two spans of time that you were here, 1956 to 1961, before Chicago, and then the time after 1985 through 2012. And so congratulations, and thank you so much.
Jeff, if you want to use Leonard Binder as a model, I hope you don't get the idea of leaving after your chairmanship. At any rate, ladies and gentlemen, Professor Leonard Binder.
Yona Shaner Binder, Bachelor of Science in Chemistry, MBA, Chicago. Nava Binder, Grossman, BA in Swarthmore, PhD in Sociology. Giora Binder, BA at Princeton, law degree, Law, at Yale. Among other members of this tribe, these three deserve much of the tribute directed at me. For their willing participation in frequent and lengthy field trips and research adventures, they are to be praised for whatever fruitful attainments were realized. I am particularly pleased that the family was able to maintain its familiar structure and function while adapting to the exigencies of field research, holding down jobs, learning some of the language, and making friends, Without such supporting activity, it is hard to imagine whatever success might be achieved in our limited attempts to understand the remarkable changes that are overtaking our many friends in the Middle East. You're not hearing it? Is it too soft? Do I have enough to dent this?
Whatever you want.
Speak into the mic.
This is a brief article that I wrote. The title is Global and Regional Hegemony, the Search for Order in the Middle East. In a remarkable coincidence, the Arab Spring has challenged firmly established pessimistic assessments of the prospects for democratic development in the Arab states, while diverting attention from the imminent culmination of a long-term upward trend in the autonomy of the regional international system. A typical listing of the democratic shortcomings of Middle Eastern governments may be found in the 2005 Freedom of the World Special Edition on Freedom in the Middle East and North Africa. The democracy deficits of Middle East states include concentration of power in the executive branch, no separation of powers, judiciaries and legislatures are not independent, formal political oppositions are repressed, media are controlled, rule of law and civil rights are eroded, competitive economic practices have been blocked, ineffective and corrupt government have been perpetuated, inequality of women prevails, rentier state practices are endemic, extremist ideologies flourish, and so on. To the credit of the author of the introduction to this work, reference is made to, quote, significant signs of ferment and democratic pressure in Iran, Iraq, Palestine, Yemen, Jordan, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Qatar. Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, and Syria are treated separately, and all four receive a negative freedom rating. Obviously, the loci of the Arab Spring are where we would least expect them to be, and news of these events has been rapidly transmitted to an eager international audience. The Arab Spring is as much an international event as a local political event, and it may contribute to political change both locally and regionally. The corollary of democracy deficits might be expected to be manifested in the absence of popular influence on foreign policy, a sphere usually dominated by authoritarian regimes often acting under the shifting pressures of a number of global powers. In fact, the Arab Spring has generated a widespread political movement demanding the opening of regional political systems, including issues of foreign policy to popular participation. This movement has transcended the barriers of authoritarian sovereignties and transformed the dynamics of regional international relations. It has been said that the movement began in Tunisia and that it had originated from the impoverished depths of Arab society. But it may also be noted that the rise of this vigorously diffuse movement has all but erased the last vestiges of what has been called the Pax Americana in the Middle East. The point here is not that the Arab Spring is directed against the perpetuation of an external hegemony over the Middle East, but rather that the United States greatly underestimated the military, the economic, and the intellectual requirements of establishing a regional hegemony as an extension of what was thought to be an unchallengeable global unipolarity. Nor should we forget that the Arab Spring movement coincided with the emergence of parallel succession debates in several Arab states, including Egypt, Libya, Syria, Tunisia, and Yemen. Far from being able to dominate the region, the United States now finds itself in a position where its persuasive capacities with its regional allies have been diminished, and where its global influence is readily challenged by China and Russia and other emergent powers. The relatively rapid development of a multipolar global system has contributed to the development of a more complex regional system as the interaction of the global and regional systems has increased. In particular, the rise of both Iran and Turkey as regional powers capable of influencing the global balance of power to some degree has increased the complexity of the international system while promising compensatory changes within the Middle Eastern regional system. Curiously enough, the new structure of the Middle Eastern system is shaping up as a sectarian confrontation, setting the political heirs of the Ottomans versus the hierarchatic successors of the Safavids, the Qajars, and the Pahlavis. Turkey and Iran have also taken opposed positions regarding the prolonged civil strife in Syria, but they have also declared their commitment to cooperate in crushing Kurdish terrorist attacks, quotes, originating in the northern Iraq. The Arabs, despite the sensational consequences of the Arab Spring, are deeply engaged in a variety of political struggles that have become increasingly internationalized. Libya's regional In Libya, of course, European states have played a major role while diminishing Libya's regional significance. By contrast, Bahrain, Yemen, Iraq, and above all, Syria have emerged as multi-state regional conflicts which are likely to contribute to profound changes in the regional balance of power. Anthony Shadid, writing in the New York Times of September 27, 2011, captured the response of Turkey to the opportunities presented by the Arab Spring. These days, he wrote, Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan, quote, may be the most popular figure in the Middle East. The foreign minister envisions a new world order there, quotes. But he adds, no one is ready to declare a Pax Turcana in the Middle East. Turkey's foreign policy caught the attention of many in the Middle East and beyond after Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan his tour of Tunisia, Egypt, and Libya, 3 Arab countries that have witnessed revolutions, end quote. Shadid adds, quote, days later, Foreign Minister Ahmet Davutoglu spoke boldly of an axis between Egypt and Turkey, 2 of the region's most populous and militarily powerful countries, that would underpin a new order in the region, end quote. In sum, it appears that at least 4 major changes have emerged in the Middle East, each of which will require a major adaptation of policy on the part of regional and global powers. 1, I'll number the 4 outcomes. The relationship between the global balance of power and the regional balance of power has greatly changed. We knew that bipolarity ended with the collapse of the Soviet Union, but we succeeded in deluding ourselves that we could win global support for a unipolar arrangement based on our playing the role of benevolent universal hegemon, orchestrating the balance of regional and global interests in the interest of all. Our misadventures in Iraq and Afghanistan have clarified the limitations of our capacities to realize the goals of hegemonic stability theory. As a consequence, it can no longer be asserted that the balance of regional power depends on the balance of global power. Number two in this series. The demise of the delusion of a Pax Americana has encouraged many political and lay persons to explore the possibilities of the pursuit of the new strategies of cooperation and competition at the regional level, without regard for the response of global powers. This change encourages both bilateral and multilateral efforts to cooperate with regional powers, as in the cases of Libya and Syria. Of even greater interest and surprise, we find that many ordinary citizens have begun to take more serious interest in the affairs of neighboring states, to such an extent that they have demonstrated a willingness to adopt the activist strategies of the Arab Spring. In other words, the Arab Spring has uncovered a civic source of international political action at the regional level, which has been able to evade authoritarian government control. Third change. The advent of Arab Spring has been a surprise to most observers of the region, because it has come at a time when most of us had become discouraged of the possibility of political reform and the predicted unfolding of anticipated processes of political development, modernization, and democratization. Many of us were inclined to concentrate on explanations of failure to develop rather than the opposite. Consequently, it has not been surprising to see many colleagues trying to explain the process as a victory for democracy. But before we can conclude that the Arab Spring has been a success, we shall have to confront the problem of the electoral victories of the Islamic moderates, the Islamic Salafis, and the continued popularity of exponents of Islamic violence, al-Unf al-Islami. These electoral results have raised the question of whether the movement advances the cause of democracy or whether it suggests that the Arab Spring is part of a larger regional ideological Islamic movement which includes Iran and Turkey. The fourth change. Despite democratic posturing, events in Egypt, Libya, Syria, Turkey, Lebanon, Yemen, and Bahrain all suggest that much of the energy of the Arab Spring is generated by ethnic, sectarian, and religious conflict. But beyond these Islamic dimensions, the growing autonomy of the region increases the strategic power of the strongest regional powers, Egypt, Turkey, and Iran. Beyond these most prominent states, the regional balance of power and structure of interaction are also affected by non-sovereign or semi-autonomous status of sectarian, tribal, ethnic, language, and other groups, giving rise to types of conflict which have no real resolution, especially when these populations cross international boundaries, as in the case of the Kurds in Turkey, Iran, Iraq, and Syria, or the Alawites in Syria and Turkey. Thus, the fourth area of change will reveal itself as each of the players in the region, including Israel, which we have not mentioned here, must take account of the changes and devise a response that will be most conducive to the well-being of the region as a whole, or suffer consequences possibly worse than those that have already passed into history. And thank you for your attention. Thank you so much more.